November 9th. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm mo.news.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, it is moving day in my world today. It's like my latest moving day.
I was going to say, I feel like this is once a week.
It's always moving day. Well, the problem is we moved out of our previous place. The place we're moving into wasn't ready, so we've been in temporary digs for the last month. So now the move is completed after 4 weeks. So,
well, good luck, and I am very excited for you and your family to have a little bit of stability coming up.
Yeah, living out of a suitcase ain't no fun. But, you know, it shows you how little you actually need. You know, like you live in an apartment or a home, you have all this stuff, and you're like, I can live. I mean, it's the baby that needs like 3 suitcases. Like, I'm good with one. Like a suitcase just of diapers, right?
The kids complicate everything is pretty much the bottom line.
They're the most, at the same time, they fulfill you in a way you've never been fulfilled, like, unconditional love, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, they make life more challenging, complications, especially in the nap era.
I remember when my daughter was first born, we got a car. We got like a small SUV type of car, and we're like, this will be plenty of room. It's one kid. How much space? It's a little baby. Yeah. How much space does she need? Anytime we left the house, this car was filled like we couldn't even see out of the trunk.
You can never see out the back. You got to work off of the side mirrors. We just had
we're like,
drive.
What happened?
As they get bigger, I'm told they have less stuff until like college move-in day.
I can attest to that. Anyway, good luck with your move.
Thank you.
And let's get to some news here. Starting with politics, face to face, we preview tomorrow night's Harris-Trump debate, what's at stake and how each candidate is preparing. And Moshe, you will be in Philadelphia.
Yeah, headed down to Philadelphia first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be in the media room, the spin room. We'll have more details on that in the podcast. Jill, the preparations are interesting. One of the candidates is doing full-on 90-minute debates with one of their aides literally dressed as the other candidate. Can you guess which?
Moshe, I think I have an idea. And I just realized that you, despite being done with your move, hopefully by the end of today, will still be living out of a suitcase for another 24 hours because you're going to Philadelphia.
We'll begin the unpacking and then more packing later today.
All right, why a former top Republican leader, one of the men once most hated by Democrats, is endorsing Kamala Harris.
2024, a year of odd bedfellows.
We're learning more about all of the warning signs that the family and school had about the 14-year-old Georgia shooter last week, including the phone call that his mother desperately made to the school just before he opened fire. The beleaguered Boeing space capsule made its return to Earth over the weekend without the astronauts that it first brought up to space. A new front in the Middle East as several Israelis are killed by a Jordanian truck driver. The Super Bowl has officially announced the halftime show for the next Super Bowl.
It's one half of one of the biggest feuds in music this year, Jill.
And American tennis players competed an attempt to win the men's and women's U.S. Open finals for the first time in 22 years over the weekend. We'll tell you how it went.
Wah, wah.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
Here's your clue. Today is the anniversary of a music performance that censors were so worried about that they only showed the top half of the performer.
Huh? I have no idea. Okay.
It gives you a sense of where we were in that era.
Elvis?
Jill, you may be very close. We'll give you all the details at the end of the podcast.
All right, we are just 24 hours away from the first and what could be the only face-to-face debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, hosted by ABC News at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. The debate could be the only time that Trump and Harris go head-to-head on the debate stage, given that Trump has been running for president 3 straight times since 2015 and has already been president for 1 term. This debate is largely going to be about defining Kamala Harris. The question, can she continue to make the case that she is the change candidate despite being the sitting vice president. The latest New York Times poll finds that 40% of likely voters say that she does represent change. She's looking to get that number above 50%. Or can Trump successfully use the 90-minute debate tomorrow night to attach her to Joe Biden and negative feelings that a majority of voters have about the current White House, including about inflation, the border, and instability around the world? The latest polling shows that still about 30% of voters say they do not know enough about her. They want to learn more about her views on the issues. And that compares to about 10% who say that they don't know enough about Trump. I mean, he's been president and has run for president twice. So what's going on?
It's interesting that about 10% of voters are like, yeah, I still need to know more about Trump at this point.
As for preparations, the two candidates are getting ready in different ways. So you've got Vice President Kamala Harris. She spent several days in a Pittsburgh hotel doing highly choreographed debate practice sessions ahead of Tuesday night's clash. There is a stage and even replica TV lighting. There's an advisor in full method acting mode, not just playing Donald Trump, but inhabiting him, wearing a boxy suit and a long tie. Do we know who it is, Moshe?
Yeah, no, this is Philippe Reines, a longtime former advisor to Hillary Clinton. He did this in 2016. He did this in 2020. He can fully take on Trump. He has studied Trump. He impersonates Trump. And he's trying out all the various lines Trump may try out as they try to get her ready. Like, how would you react to this? How would you react to that?
And then on the other hand, Trump's preparations are more improv. His team won't even really call it quote unquote debate prep. Instead, they're calling it policy time. It's really just meant, they say, to refresh him on his record. According to advisors, nobody is playing Harris. Sometimes his aides will sit at a long table opposite him and bat questions back and forth. Other times he pulls up a chair closer to them. Trump has held just a handful of these types of sessions so far. In Trump's debate prep sessions, Congressman Matt Gaetz has embraced the role of posing tough questions to Trump, including on uncomfortable subjects like his criminal convictions. This is according to a person with knowledge of these meetings. And then Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democratic congresswoman who memorably successfully attacked Harris in a 2019 presidential primary debate. She has also been helping Trump prepare. His advisors tell the New York Times that they worry he will not be able to stop himself from showing his deep contempt for Harris. While they say he respected Hillary Clinton's experience when he ran against her back in 2016, he views Harris as unintelligent and reportedly uses misogynistic language to describe her in private. Trump's advisors are acutely aware of the risk that he could appear overly aggressive, as he did in his first disastrous debate with Biden back in 2020.
Yeah, remember, that was a debate where he interrupted Biden over and over and over and over again and turned some voters against him.
One close Trump ally says that the former president's advisors have urged him to just be, quote, happy Trump in the debate instead of mean bully Trump, while pressing a policy-based case against Harris. But there are risks to that approach as well. One ally warning that if Trump tried to stay on his best behavior, he could overcorrect and come across as low energy.
Yeah, this is something Trump will complain about openly at his campaign rallies. He's like, my advisors, they want me to stick to policy. Like, should I personally insult them or not? Should I insult her or not? And he'll ask the crowd, and the crowd will roar. He doesn't want to engage in details on the economy, etc. He wants to do what he does. He wants to do his shtick. The concern there is that if he goes too deep into that he could turn off some people and remind people of some things they might not like about him, especially as a key constituency here is female voters, as she is right now winning more female voters than Hillary Clinton was in 2016 and Biden was in 2020. And to win them back, some advisors say, pull back on the personal insults. So who we get from Trump, unclear. It's one of the reasons why his campaign liked the ruling, like the rule about mics being muted when the other person's talking. Remember, this was a rule that was agreed to based on the Biden campaign's ask back in June for that debate. They wanted the mics muted. Why? Because Biden easily loses his train of thought, as we witnessed, and they didn't want Trump constantly interrupting him like he did in 2020. Now you have the Harris campaign saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. We want the mics on all the time because we want to showcase, Trump interrupting her. We want to have moments like that. Well, the Trump campaign said, no, we're going to keep the mics off here. And it keeps, some advisors will tell you, the candidate more in line. So bottom line here, despite what the Harris campaign wanted, the mics will be muted here. The Trump campaign has a really straightforward goal here. Force Harris to both own her partnership with Biden, who still is very unpopular, take responsibility for the parts of his presidency that Americans are most unhappy about: high cost of living, chaos around the world, public safety questions, instability in Ukraine, the Middle East, the border, saying, you can't turn the page here. You are not the change candidate. You've been in office for 4 years. He's going to try to reinforce to Americans, this is a famous line from Ronald Reagan in 1980, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And the Trump people know that for many voters, the answer is no. And so can they get Trump to stay in line there? Can he be disciplined on that stage tomorrow night? Now, notably, Trump has the most general election debate experience in modern American history. He debated 3 times against Hillary Clinton, twice against Biden, and then another time against Biden in June. So this will be his 7th presidential general election debate. And of course, he had all those primary debates back in 2016. For Kamala Harris, it's her first. So she is spending a lot of time prepping here. They've never met face to face, it turns out, because Trump didn't attend the inauguration in 2020. And she was never over at the White House when she was a senator. So they've actually never been in the same room together. So she's having full-on 90-minute mock debates, 2-time, and it comes as she has stalled in the polls here. She did get that surge after her announcement into the convention, but not much of a bounce afterwards. Trump is up in several states, so she needs a big night here. Now, one concern from Democrats: Harris is known for meticulously over-preparing for major events. That is a concern here. That's why they're holding the full-on debates, so they can cut out, stuff that she memorized, saying, what matters here in your 2-minute answer, in your 1-minute answer. So she's the one, as we noted at the top, who's going through the full-on debates. She's got Philippe Reigns dressed as Trump. She has multiple people from Hillary World, people who've prepared multiple debates. Allegedly, she's studying debate tape, watching Trump's previous debates here. And so we'll see what happens. Hillary Clinton did an interview late last week. She suggests to Kamala Harris that she should not be baited, but she should bait him. Hillary Clinton takes pride in the fact, of course she did lose that election, that she called Trump a Russian puppet. He sputtered on stage, Hillary says, and it's how you get him out of his comfort zone. And you trigger him. So basically, Hillary Clinton is suggesting that Kamala Harris tries to poke the bear here and tries to, get Trump to, get angry and say things that he wasn't planning on saying. Jill will be in Philadelphia watching it all with the media, a couple blocks away, actually, because it's an ABC debate without a studio audience. And so there'll be like 1,000 members of the media. We'll be among them a couple blocks away there in Center City, Philadelphia, watching the debate. We'll have live coverage of the Instagram feed, and then we'll have live analysis on Premium, mo.news Premium. Are you on Premium yet? mo.news/premium? I know Jill is, but the rest of you, if you're not, you're going to miss a lot. So
I thought you were asking me, and I'm like, I better be, right?
You message me back there. We tag each other. Anyway, mo.news/premium to join Premium. If you want to just check it out, we have a free trial option, mo.news/free trial. Check it out. See how you like it. 99% of people, Jill, don't leave Premium. Those are our numbers so far.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump would be very jealous, Moshe.
I'm a 99% approval rating.
Correct.
Yes. It's going to be interesting, Jill. I mean, it's so funny because I remember when we did our preview of the June debate, we're like, this could be a nothing burger or this could be really consequential. It turned out to be the second thing. Probably one of the most, if not the most consequential debate in American history, given the fact that it forced Biden to drop out several weeks later. So, I imagine people who may not have tuned in June are going to be tuning in tomorrow night.
And sticking with politics, Harris has picked up the endorsement of a former Republican vice president in a turn of events that would be hard to explain to anyone just a few years ago. We're talking, of course, about former Vice President Dick Cheney. He served as George W. Bush's VP from 2001 to 2009 and was a liberal boogeyman, basically Darth Vader to Democrats. He says he's going to be voting for Kamala Harris this fall. So that means he's going to join his daughter, Liz Cheney, the former congresswoman who voted with Trump 93% of the time, but then turned against him after January 6th, seeing him as a threat to democracy. after he didn't accept the election result. So she has since become an outcast in the new Republican Party and announced last week that she too would be supporting Harris. So a day later, her father has joined her. Former Vice President Cheney said in a statement, quote, "In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He can never be trusted with power again. As citizens, we each have a duty to put country above partisanship, to defend our Constitution. That is why I will be casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris."
It's a remarkable thing, Jill. Somehow our politics have gotten to the point where Bernie Sanders, AOC, Barack Obama, and Dick Cheney are now all supporting the same candidate for president. It shows you, by the way, how far Trump has taken the Republican Party in a new direction. And so now you have both Republican vice presidents of the last 30 years, Mike Pence, Trump's own former vice president, and Dick Cheney, both not supporting him. Of course, Cheney saying openly he'll support Harris. Pence has just said he's not going to support Trump. He hasn't gone so far as saying he's voting for Harris. But it comes as you've had a number of top Republican leaders, former Republican leaders in recent years, who say they don't support Trump. The 2012 nominee, Mitt Romney, the 2008 nominee, John McCain, before he passed, wasn't supporting him. Former House Speaker, Paul Ryan. Naturally, that leads to the question, what about George W. Bush? What's his deal? The last Republican president before Trump. Well, he doesn't have a great relationship with Trump either, but he was asked over the weekend, hey, are you going to follow your former VP, Cheney, and endorse Harris? He says, his team says no. He's done with politics. He ain't commenting on 2024. You can take that to mean he ain't supporting Trump, but he isn't going to go so far as supporting Harris. He said back in 2020, apparently to friends, he wasn't supporting Trump for his reelection. In 2016, if we go back then, remember Trump beat, among others, Jeb Bush, George's brother, for the nomination in 2016. W, as a former president, still attended his inauguration in 2016, commenting to people around him afterwards. Trump, remember, gave that inauguration speech in 2016, talking about America being a wasteland of carnage. W's quote about that speech, that was some weird shit. So that's what you know about where W is on this. There's amazing photos of like W's facial reaction being like, what? I thought we were supposed to give like these inspirational speeches. Like, what was that? Like,
what is happening here?
Like, so he just that encapsulated W. That's like his only quote that's come out for the past 8 years about Trump.
I was reading on the mo.news premium account where someone was like, poor George W. Bush. Can't anyone ask him about painting? It's all he wants to talk about now.
Right. Like Bush, left office in 2009. He's taken up painting. He's obsessed with painting. By the way, if you do want to see George W. Bush's paintings, I Googled it. I was like, well, where are they on display somewhere? Epcot Center. Disney has a whole, apparently, exhibit right now. Among the many things you can do at Disney World. If you're interested, go check out W's paintings. Apparently, they run through 2025. But in all
sorry, I'm still on the quote from the inauguration.
That's W, a man of few words, but memorable words. One serious thing here. I don't know that these endorsements matter that much, right? Like, are there like the constituency of people who are like, wait, what's Dick Cheney doing this election? Maybe I should vote how he's voting. Still, I think the point is Democrats are trying to point out that like all these former Republicans, aren't supporting Trump. There's a bunch of former cabinet secretaries, Pence, etc. His own former vice president isn't supporting him. So Democrats are trying to make an issue of that. Still, super close. As I mentioned, Harris has lost some traction on the polls here. So this is a super important debate, regardless of endorsements and all this other, stuff on the side here. And as you noted at the top, this will be all about Kamala Harris. She will look to define herself to the 1/3 of Americans who still say, I don't know that much about her. And Trump will look to define her because, of course, he's defined to the majority of Americans at this point. How it, goes, what the responses are, do the plan lines, they give the candidates a bunch of lines being like, if they say this, this is your response, and this will be memorable. How do those go? Sometimes they feel overly rehearsed. So we'll see how it all goes down. But Jill, as far as the Wednesday morning, this podcast we could talk about a completely altered election, sort of like after that Biden-Trump debate, or we could be where we are today. It's anyone's guess.
All right, Moshe, now to more details about the school shooter in Georgia who killed 2 fellow students and 2 teachers about an hour outside of Atlanta last week. The teenager appeared in court on murder charges alongside of his father, who gave him the semi-automatic weapon as a Christmas present. The 14-year-old and his father, Colin Gray, who's 54 years old, made separate appearances before a judge in Winder, Georgia. The 14-year-old and his father, 54-year-old Colin Gray, made separate appearances before a judge in Winder, Georgia on Friday. The judge told the accused gunman, who's being charged as an adult with 4 counts of murder, that he does face the prospect of life in prison if convicted. His father was brought into court afterward for his 14 charges, including 2 for second-degree murder for his recklessness in allowing his son to have a gun despite warning signs. The father faces a maximum 180 years in prison if convicted. And the hearings came as we learned about all of the warning signs that relatives were seeing about the shooter, whose name we are not using on this podcast, and how he was looking to potentially shoot up his school. The shooter's parents were divorced. He was living with his father, but his mother, Marcy Gray, apparently was getting increasingly concerned about her son's behavior. The Washington Post reports that she had told family members that she called the school on the morning of the shooting and warned a counselor about an extreme emergency involving her 14-year-old son. That account is supported by a call log from the family's shared phone plan, which shows a 10-minute call from the mother's phone to the school starting at 9:50 a.m. That's about a half an hour before witnesses say that the gunman opened fire. She says she told the school that it was an extreme emergency and for them to immediately go and find her son and check on him. Around the same time, a school administrator went to the son's math classroom. According to one student, there seemed to be confusion involving another student in the class with a similar name to that of Gray's son. Neither student was in the room, and the official left with a backpack belonging to the similarly named student. The administrator was not able to get to Gray in time, and the shooting started minutes later. We are still looking for some more clarification from the school on that.
Yeah, there was a student in that algebra class who started to tell this story on the day of the shooting, and the authorities were like, no, they don't have their story straight. Well, it appears here that they were very close to finding him, but there's confusion about his name. We still need to wait to hear more from the school here. Clearly, they're worried about liability here, and so we haven't had much in the way of official statements, but I can imagine we will hear more in the coming weeks and months here. The phone log, the fact that the mother had this conversation, apparently she also started driving 200 miles. She lives 200 miles away now from her son after her final communication with her son. He apparently texted her something along the lines of, "I'm sorry, Mom," according to the aunt, the sister of the mom. And again, we're still waiting on more details there as to what specifically he was saying that led her to actually call the school that morning, and what happened there with the confusion about the names and why they weren't able to get to him, and why a warning wasn't then sent out to all the classrooms to lock down, given what the mom had told that school counselor. Apparently, according to the mom's side of the family here, the shooter had spent months begging for mental health help. The mom's sister, the aunt again, saying that the adults around him failed him as he was seeking help here, and he had a very difficult home life. We should note the mom here pleaded guilty to charges of family violence, was ordered to have limited contact with her ex-husband. She keyed his car. She's been convicted of a number of crimes over the years herself. So he came from a very tragic situation at home. The parents had gotten divorced. There was violence issues there. And then his younger siblings, the 2 younger siblings, went to go live with the mom. And he went to live with the dad. But it's clear here there was communication, even though they lived at a distance now, with the mom, that leading to the point of these warnings and that desperate call the morning of the shooting.
All right, time for the speed read from NPR. The beleaguered Boeing Starliner spacecraft successfully landed in New Mexico just after midnight Eastern Time Saturday, ending a crucial test flight that proved to be a real headache for NASA. Officials at the space agency feared that the Starliner's thrusters could malfunction during its return, just as some thrusters had on its journey to the International Space Station. So that is why when the capsule parachuted down to Earth, it carried only cargo, and its first crew stayed behind, remaining safely on board the ISS. The two astronauts, as we've been mentioning, went up with it in June, but because it experienced multiple issues, they're going to be taking a competitor's capsule built by SpaceX back to Earth next March. The program manager for NASA's Commercial Crew Program said that leaving them there was a really tough decision. It was hard to figure out whether to be uncrewed or not, but there was enough uncertainty with regard to how the thrusters would perform that NASA officials preferred to err on the side of caution.
Better safe than sorry. They are haunted at NASA by those past disasters, the loss of Space Shuttle Columbia, Challenger. So that meant they wanted to keep these astronauts behind in case something happened. So these astronauts, Sonny Williams, Butch Wilmore, as we've been discussing, plan to spend 8 days in space, will now spend 8 or 9 months in space. They're up there after the Boeing Starliner turned out to land safely in New Mexico early Saturday morning. NASA was asked, do you have second thoughts about not bringing them back? And they say, it's always hard to have that retrospective look, but I think we made the right decision here, but to keep them behind. So now that Starliner is back on the ground, Boeing and NASA will have to figure out what the issue is, how to fix it, how to keep them from overheating in the future. Boeing Starliner already years delayed, years over budget, and NASA really wants two options. SpaceX and Boeing to be able to take their astronauts up, given all the various things they have planned in the coming years. So a lot of pressure here on Boeing to finally fix this issue.
Heading overseas from the Wall Street Journal, a Jordanian gunman shot and killed 3 Israeli civilians at an important border crossing between Israel and Jordan on Sunday. The shooter arrived in a truck from Jordan to the Allenby Bridge, which is the main land crossing between the country and Israel, and opened fire at Israelis who work at the crossing while the truck was being inspected, killing 3 people before he was shot and killed by Israeli security guards. Jordan's Interior Ministry identified the attacker as a Jordanian citizen who had crossed the bridge as a truck driver transporting commercial goods from Jordan. The Allenby Bridge is the main exit and entry point for Palestinians in the West Bank. It is now closed by Israeli authorities until further notice. Terror groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad praised the attack but did not claim responsibility, and they called on more Arab citizens to kill Israelis.
Yeah, this has been an increasing concern about the violence spreading here. Iran also trying to infiltrate Israel from the Jordanian border. Weapons smuggling has been taking place for years here, but this came at an official crossing here. And officially, Israel and Jordan have a peace treaty that they signed in 1994, so 30 years ago, and very close security and economic ties. Jordan's king depends on Israeli intelligence for his own security, ruling over a population that is about 80% Palestinian. The king is not, though he is married to a Palestinian. And so he heavily depends on the U.S. and Israel. Though among the populace, anti-Israel sentiment runs very high. In fact, October 7th, the terror attacks were celebrated on the streets in Jordan. In fact, there's a restaurant in Jordan named after October 7th. So it's not altogether shocking what took place here, but what is of concern is if this spreads further here and more people are inspired by this sort of thing. Jill, a lot of developments in the recent days in the region. There's also an investigation taking place over a separate incident. This is one where Israeli soldiers killed an American woman demonstrating in the West Bank on Friday. Witnesses, people who were protesting with her against Israeli soldiers, say she posed no threat. The Israelis say that she was instigating or near people instigating violence, throwing stones and rocks at Israeli soldiers. She is a 26-year-old Turkish-American woman named Aysenur Agi. She recently lived in Seattle. She was shot in the head and killed. Her family is calling for an independent investigation. So far, the White House has said that they support Israel's investigation, internal investigation into the incident, and are very concerned about what took place and want to hear more. The White House saying it's deeply disturbed by the killing of an American citizen and want to know answers from the Israelis here. So that is another development happening in the region. And then kind of zooming out, Bloomberg reported on Friday that Iran is sending ballistic missiles to the Russians for use against Ukraine. That defies months of warning. That defies months of warnings by U.S. and European officials. They had said, Iran, don't do this, but it appears they have dramatically escalated things here by providing ballistic missiles to the Russians. And there is increasing concern, we've told you about it in recent months, about the about the cooperation you're seeing here between the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, and the North Koreans. And that's something to watch.
And in lighter news from Rolling Stone, Kendrick Lamar will be headlining the Super Bowl halftime show in 2025. He said, quote, "Rap music is still the most impactful genre to date, and I will be there to remind the world why they got the right one." 3 years ago, Lamar was a guest during Dr. Dre's Super Bowl halftime performance.
So just before the first Sunday of the season, they made this announcement about the Super Bowl, which, by the way, takes place this year, February 9th in New Orleans. Remember, Jay-Z signed a deal with the NFL back in 2019 to make him a co-producer of the Super Bowl halftime show. So he's played a lead role here in selecting the talent. So it's been a lot of hip-hop in recent years here. Kendrick Lamar has won 17 Grammy Awards throughout his career. Considered one of the greats here of modern hip-hop music, Jay-Z saying Kendrick Lamar is a once-in-a-generation artist and performer. He has an unparalleled ability to define and influence culture globally, and his impact will be felt for years to come. Of course, you might have been watching his highly publicized feud with Drake over the last year. We won't get into details on this podcast, but that's certainly one of the big headlines in the back and forth diss tracks that have been coming out. A reminder, Usher performed last year at the Super Bowl. His set, about 13 minutes, typically the halftime performance, was the most watched halftime performance of all time. More than 123 million people watched that. The previous year, before that, was Rihanna. She was seen by 121 million people. Typically, if more people watch the Super Bowl, more people watch the halftime show. So you had Usher, Rihanna. So you had Rihanna 2 years ago, Usher last year, and this year, Kendrick.
And I love what comes next after the initial announcement is trying to guess who the guest stars will be.
Right. And Kendrick, because as you mentioned, Lamar performed as part of that whole ensemble a few years ago. So who does he bring on stage with him in February?
I'm guessing not Drake, but we'll see.
Can you imagine?
That would be must-see TV.
If he wants to beat Usher for like most watched, that could be the way.
And finally, from NBC Sports, Italian tennis phenom Jannik Sinner cast aside doping allegations and won his second Grand Slam title of the year, beating American Taylor Fritz in the U.S. Open final on Sunday. The world number one Sinner sailed through the U.S. Open bracket seemingly unfazed by disclosures that he did test positive for an anabolic steroid earlier this year. The revelation that he was found on March 10th to have taken a steroid brought a cloud on what should have been his 2024 coronation as one of the game's great young stars. The International Tennis Integrity Agency ruled that Sinner ingested the substance accidentally and opted against suspending him. The 23-year-old won this year's Australian Open and reached the semifinals of the French Open and Wimbledon. Fritz was hoping to be the first American male to win the U.S. Open in more than 20 years. The U.S. has been kept out of the men's winner circle since Andy Roddick won back in 2003. That was a long time ago. I mean, and that is what had really ushered in the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic era. So without those three guys.
Yeah, you have to go back. Like, I think it was the 2002 U.S. Open where you had like Pete Sampras versus Andy Roddick, and you had the Williams sisters playing against each other. You know, when Americans were rocking both men's and women's tennis at that point. So Fritz says, I know we've been waiting for a champion for a long time. I'm sorry I couldn't get it done. I'm going to keep working, and hopefully I'll get it done next time. Same story on the women's side, where Americans were hoping to have an American win the U.S. Open again this year. The women have had more success than the men in recent years. But that's where Aryna Sabalenka of Belarus beat American Jessica Pegula. It is Sabalenka's third Grand Slam title of her career. She's won the Australian Open twice. Last year at the U.S. Open, though, she was the runner-up to Coco Gauff, the American. So a much better finish for Sabalenka this year. Pegula, by the way, is a native New Yorker. She was participating in a major final for the first time, and she's actually won 15 of her past 17 matches over the past month, but both losses have come against Sabalenka in the finals. Jill, I know you were watching all weekend and playing tennis this weekend.
I was.
Not in the U.S. Open. You weren't playing in the U.S. Open.
No, not even close. But I'm a huge tennis fan, and I look forward to the U.S. Open every year. And I have to say, I am so excited just about this new crop of American tennis players. Finally, it feels like we have more than just one or two people to root for. So hopefully next year, we'll get an American winner.
All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1776. The Second Continental Congress formally adopts the name United States of America on this day in 1776, replacing our previous name, the United Colonies of North America. In 1850, on this day, California is admitted as our 31st state. So happy 174th birthday as a state, California. On this day in 1948, the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea is declared. Not much democratic about North Korea, but they put it in the name. It was founded by Kim Il-sung, the first dictator. He's the grandfather of the current dictator, Kim Jong-un. It's been in one family, 3 generations this whole time. And on this day in 2022, King Charles III gives his first speech to Britain as the new monarch, vowing to carry on the lifelong service of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had died one day earlier.
So we're going with 2022, Moshe. Interesting.
You know, sometimes we gotta make it recent. You know, this on this day 2 years ago, because you know I sometimes take it back a few hundred years. I feel like people are like, oh, that was only 2 years ago now. We end here with some pop culture history. On this day in 1956, the king of rock and roll, Jill, you guessed it right, Elvis, appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. 60 million viewers, or 83% of all TV viewers at the time. Can you imagine 83% of Americans watching the same thing? Even the debate, a lot of people were watching it, but it'll probably be like 15% of American viewers tuned in for Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show. Apparently, a bunch of viewers called in afterwards saying that his moves were too vulgar. Remember, he used to thrust his hips, Elvis did, in the 1950s. That was too much for a lot of parents who were like, I cannot have my children watch this. So then that episode, they showed him full body. He returns to Ed Sullivan a year later, and they only shoot him from the top half, as I mentioned, to get around TV censors who are like, you cannot show him shaking his hips. It is too aggressive and too improper for American TV viewers.
Oh, how times have changed.
What was the big song a couple years ago? WAP, Jill? We won't go into what it stands for, but that's where we've gotten to music. In some more recent music history news, on this day in 1995, 29 years ago, Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio reaches #1 on the Billboard charts. Jill, one of the best music videos of all time. Michelle Pfeiffer, Coolio.
Oh, yes, right, because it was a movie.
Yeah, off the Dangerous Mind soundtrack. Jill, sometimes I mention stuff from the mid-90s. You have a lot to say. Sometimes not so much.
I got nothing.
And we end here on this day in 2008, 16 years ago. Katy Perry releases Hot and Cold.
And who would have thought all of these years later, my daughter loves Katy Perry. She's big with the elementary school kids, Moshe.
Katy Perry, you know, converting another generation. Alpha Gen, loving Katy Perry.
It's the fireworks song.
There you go.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
And join Premium, by the way. We have a Premium podcast, since you guys are all podcast listeners here. And right now, I have a special edition with Sharon McMahon about her new book on American history, Unsung Heroes, featuring 12 people who changed American history. You likely have heard of none of them, and they did some remarkable things. So we nerd out on history for an hour. Check it out. It's a premium podcast, so you got to sign up. mo.news/premium.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Later.